Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us. We are here at Token2049 in Singapore, and we're very lucky to have with us Richard Teng. Richard is head of Binance Regional Markets, and he's very kindly given up some of his precious time to talk with us today. Richard, I know you're a very busy man, so I really appreciate it. Let's start, if we may, by just talking about this event. We're here at Token2049, this huge kind of flagship event in the crypto calendar, completely sold out over the next couple of days, thousands of people projected to attend, and so much more happening around it. As a native Singaporean, you must be delighted to see this level of enthusiasm in the industry here in town.
Absolutely, but first of all, thank you for having me again, Guy. It's very, very good to see you again.
You too.
Token2049, I think, has gone from strength to strength. It's very exciting, but this is a very exciting week for Singapore. So it started off with Ethereum Singapore, Token2049, there's Milken Singapore, and the week is going to be concluded by Formula One. So there's plenty of side events, plenty of meetings that are holding. So I'm all geared up for it. I spoke at Ethereum Singapore, I'm speaking at Token2049, and then hosting a number of side events that we have here.
Yeah, it's all happening this week.
It's all happening this week, yeah.
And I mean, I guess it's kind of all the more impressive, really, given that in crypto in general, kind of market sentiment is very, very low. Obviously, prices have been suppressed for a while now. There are lots of concerns, regulatory and otherwise, on the horizon. So it's kind of heartening to see an event like this so well attended and so much enthusiasm and progress being made in the industry.
Absolutely, but in any of such a year where there's slightly less volatility, prices are stable, it's slightly less bullish compared to some of the previous year, people tend to focus on the negative, right? But if you look at the positive, you're going to see a lot more regulators starting to regulate this space, a lot more institutions, including the likes of BlackRock, Fidelity, Charles Schwab, coming into this space. And that means that mass adoption will start to take place, right? Because with those two factors, with regulatory certainty and with institutional adoption, the future for this industry is very, very bullish. So if you look at longer term trend, I'm very bullish, right? Because those are the two key factors that you need to see to continue to see mass adoption in this space.
Yeah. I guess it's easy to look at, lots of bad news happening, if you like, and think that, that's not progress. But in actual fact, even though, a lot of the news has not been great this year, the industry is still moving forward. Do you think that's fair to say?
It is. We are seeing a lot of good projects, a lot of new use cases coming into stream. I travel the world quite extensively in my role, and it's always very interesting to see crypto in action. Right? In many parts of the world, where it's a very young demographics, very educated, and financial inclusion is quite low. Right? And that's where you really see the beauty and the power of crypto, right? Where people do not have access to banks, do not have access to payment system, ability to trade, etc. The entire blockchain ecosystem, crypto, allows them to do that, right? Today, they are able to use crypto to make payments, to make transfer and remittance to their loved ones at a fraction of the cost of what traditional finance offer. They are able to get exposure to financial assets. Again, at a fraction of the cost on the 24/7 basis, right? Which is something that you cannot get in TradFi, in traditional finance. And that's the beauty. In many parts of the world, that's going through hyperinflation. Wealth preservation takes place via stable coins in many instances, and people are much better off holding on to stable coins than holding on to their fiat currency. So I see all those things in action, which is why I'm very supportive. We are here to support the future of the crypto ecosystem and support the freedom of money.
Yeah. And I guess a lot of people perhaps gauge the health of the industry by looking at the charts and looking at Bitcoin's price. And in actual fact, I guess you guys at Binance have a pretty unique perspective on actual metrics that I guess matter more, things like adoption and use and volume in countries like, you were talking about Vietnam earlier, in countries like that may be kind of a little bit off the radar for many crypto investors, but are actually kind of in a way sort of ground zero for mass adoption and actual use of cryptocurrency, like you talked about just now.
Yeah, so I mean, if you take a step back, crypto adoption is still relatively low today, right? So it's about 4 to 5% of global population. What we are focusing on is really developing and broadening the entire ecosystem, right? If we can get from 4 or 5% to 10%, everybody is much better off, right? So we are focusing on that. We are focusing on real cases where our users and products and services that our users need. Many parts of the world have very strong crypto adoption. You mentioned Vietnam as one of them. But in any of these markets where I mentioned there's two factors at play, young demographics, the ability to learn, they're very tech savvy, I think that's one factor. The other factor is slightly lower financial inclusion where they can't get access to traditional finance. And that's where they take a huge interest in crypto. You see very sharp adoption. In Asia Pacific alone, you look at the likes of Indonesia, for instance, Vietnam, Philippines, and the list goes on. You have many different parts of Latin America that falls into that category, Middle East and Africa, even some parts of Eastern Europe, for instance. So throughout the globe, you see these being replicated throughout.
Yeah. And let's talk about Binance a bit, if we may, because 2023 has been a pretty tough year for the company.
Yes.
So can I ask, Richard, I mean, what have been your sort of takeaways from this year? You're obviously sort of older and wiser. What do you make of what Binance, the company, has kind of been through over the last few months?
Yes, indeed. So this year, there's a lot of FUD. There's quite a fair bit of very unfortunate misreporting in many sense, right? But this is part of the crypto industry, I would say, right? We have to withstand regulatory scrutiny, we have to withstand media scrutiny, and I think that's useful. I do think that every crypto firm will have to go through this ultimately, right? Binance being the largest will be the first, will not be the last. But we have to make use of this opportunity to get much stronger, and we can withstand. We are very confident of ourselves, both of our financial strength, as well as our paramount underlying mission, which is to protect users, right? So we always say that users' assets are fully protected one-to-one basis. We are the most secure exchange. Actually, we are the most regulated exchange. We have 18 regulatory approval throughout the world. So we are scrutinized by regulators. But we are taking this opportunity to continue to pivot very strongly. I mean, it's still relatively young companies by any measure. It's only 6 years old. Many 6-year firms are still looking for funding, are still looking for growth. We are very fortunate that we are in a very strong position. So we have to make use of this opportunity to continue to pivot, both in terms of making sure our users are well taken care of, but also in terms of enhancing our products and services, and also positioning the company in terms of management team, bench strength, for the future. So we continue to enhance on all these areas to make ourselves stronger and to have a very vibrant and sustainable franchise going forward.
Okay, and I mean, Binance, obviously, as a result of kind of this regulatory scrutiny and other difficulties, Binance has perhaps lost a bit of market share over the last 12 months. Now, do you feel that that's something that you guys can win back, or do you feel that perhaps, obviously, you've got new competitors, new competitor exchanges popping up all the time, and the sort of crypto landscape shifting a little bit? Do you think you guys can regain that market share, or do you think like the landscape has perhaps changed a little bit?
Our key focus is not really on monthly or yearly market share, right? That's not our focus. Our focus is really building a very vibrant ecosystem. As I mentioned, if we can continue to boost crypto adoption in terms of crypto deployment, everyone is better off, right? If we manage to grow the industry from 5% crypto adoption to 10%, even with a much lower market share, the company will be much better off, right? So that's our focus, right? It's not really worth trying to get a few percentage points. I mean, we are the largest by now. It's not worth a lot of effort to try to get a few percentage points off our competitors. So our focus is firstly on those things, right? And really making sure that the products that we have are really what the users need. We continue to source for good projects around the world. We are quite stringent, as you know, in terms of listing projects compared to many other exchanges, because fundamentally we want to make sure that the projects that we release have the liquidity, have the use cases, are the products that users are looking for. So we are pretty stringent on those aspects. But it just goes to the underlying notion that we are not so concerned on that, but we are really concerned about long-term sustainability and long-term deployment.
Sorry to interrupt you folks, but I have to let you know about the Coin Bureau deals page. Now, my team and I have been able to pull together some of the best promos and discounts in the crypto space. We're talking trading fee discounts of over 50%, thousands of dollars in bonus airdrops, amazing deals at top exchanges, reduced prices on hardware wallets, and much, much more besides. So just go to coinbureau.com/deals, also linked to below, and find the promo suited to you. Enjoy the rest of the video. And can I ask a bit about you, Richard, because you're becoming a more and more well-known face of Binance across the world, and you obviously have years of experience and establishing regulatory frameworks. You've worked here in Asia a lot. You've also been in the UAE and elsewhere. So can I ask, someone with your experience, what advice would you give to other crypto companies, be they exchanges or projects or whatever? What advice would you give to them if they were trying to talk with or deal with regulators in whatever country?
Sure. I think fundamentally, it's quite important for all stakeholders within the crypto ecosystem, especially in the industry, to bear in mind that our interests are very aligned with actually those of the policymakers as well as regulators, right? What are those, right? Market hygiene, user protection, security of the platform, right? So if you focus on those things, those are the things that both policymakers and regulators are looking out for. The lingo will be different, the positioning will be quite different, but fundamentally they are the same, right? So the more you can put yourself in the shoes of where they're coming from, I think the better off. Of course, the industry is concerned more with the growth dimension instead of the risk dimension. But it's how to balance the two, and it's how to convince the policymakers and the regulators that the growth dimension is equally important. You just need to make sure that you support innovation, because if you just manage all the risks, it means that there's no activity. It's how do you manage risk in a proportionate, well thought through manner, right? To allow the industry to continue to grow in a very vibrant fashion, which are really in line with the interests of policymakers. They want to see economic growth. They want to see new talent pool being developed in this space. So again, that bridge is very important, understanding where they're coming from, understanding your needs, and having that effective communications are extremely important.
And you talk about policymakers wanting to encourage growth, and that leads me on to, I want to talk a little bit about Asia in general, because I think if we talk about somewhere like the United States, it's kind of been hostile to the crypto industry and therefore hostile to the growth of the industry in that country. So do you feel, Richard, that with your experience of traveling and working throughout Asia, do you feel that Asia could perhaps flip the US in terms of crypto investment users in the future? Obviously, the US, despite the regulatory situation there, is still crypto's biggest market by a long way. Is that something that can change, do you think? And is Asia the place where that change could come from, realistically?
First of all, I would say that every country, every policymaker will have their own political as well as regulatory consideration. And as industry players, we just need to respect those and operate within those boundaries, right? So those are considerations for country to decide. But you asked a very, very good question. Is it Asia? Is it Middle East? Is it Africa? I would say that every region has its bright spots. Every region, you have jurisdiction and countries that wish to fly that crypto flag and be the next important crypto hub. In Asia, it started off with Japan, if you remember, in 2017, flying that flag. And then subsequently, you have Singapore in 2020 announcing its ambition. More recently, this year, you have Hong Kong stating its entire Web3 ambition, crypto ambition, etc., and making a lot of strides on that front, which is very exciting, right? But that is being replicated throughout the world, I would say, in different parts of the world. In Middle East, for example, you have the likes of Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Bahrain, all flying that flag, right? All providing license, providing certainty to industry players. The same is happening in Europe. Right? We have our regional headquarters for Europe in France. Again, within that economic bloc, the French regulators are the one that really are willing to engage the industry very closely, understand the needs of the industry. So we're very positive on that front. So every time we see all these trends, we are very supportive of what's being done. In many instances, we have regulators and policymakers reach out to us to help them develop the framework that, on the one hand, manage the risks, on the other hand, support the innovation. Right? So we are very, very happy with all these efforts, and all these efforts are ongoing. We are having many different conversations throughout the world on that front. Same thing is happening in Latin America. So if you ask me which region, I can't say for sure. Asia Pacific indeed is a very important region, given the size of the population here. But every region will have its bright spots, and it really depends on what develops into the future, right? I don't have a crystal ball to say which one will be the most dominant or most important. I think all of them are equally important, so we have to continue to focus our attention on all this important marketplace.
And I guess the ideal state for the crypto industry would be to decentralize as much as possible. So perhaps in the future, it'd be hard to identify one particular region and say, well, this is the global center of crypto, because I guess that's kind of against the ethos of which, the Bitcoin, for instance, was created, and within mind, this idea that, it aims at decentralization. We want to have, I guess, a global industry where no particular jurisdiction or country or even group of countries can be said to completely dominate the marketplace.
Absolutely. I think you're absolutely right on that front. I just wanted to share that I was in a quite interesting panel session earlier this year with very senior European regulators and bankers on my panel, right? And the bankers were going at it to say that, crypto is in many ways not what is needed for the industry, etc. They are not believers in it. And a very senior policymaker from the Bank of International Settlement, BIS, said this: the only reason why crypto is taking off in such a manner is because banks and financial institutions have failed the market. That was a very strong statement. I was quite taken aback. But that's a very strong statement. But there's truth in that statement. Because if you look at traditional finance, and it goes back to the point, if you look at the banking system, operates in most countries 9:30 to 4 o'clock, right? Trading system operates again 10 to 3 p.m., for instance, in many parts of the world. Trading and settlement takes place T+1, T+2, T+3. Unlike crypto, which is 24/7, it never sleeps. It is cleared and settled instantaneously. The risk is very minimal because of all those things. And people fail to realize that crypto, Bitcoin, is the first major public infrastructure that anybody in the world can get access to on a 24/7 basis. At a fraction of the cost of what traditional finance offer. And people always forget that. I mean, if we keep reminding ourselves that is the beauty of the entire Bitcoin crypto ecosystem, it affords that level of financial inclusion that we have never seen before. I think everybody will be much stronger and in terms of understanding what this industry brings to the entire economy.
And I guess, in a way, what you've just said, the benefits of Bitcoin, crypto more widely, you can see why banks and international organizations like the BIS and many others feel, I guess, threatened by crypto in a way. And I guess that is kind of the main motivating factor, perhaps, that we've seen behind a lot of policy being put forward by the BIS, the International Monetary Fund springs to mind, the World Bank as well, the Financial Action Task Force. All these guys have been pretty vocally anti-crypto in the past, and I guess, as you say, they're kind of threatened by the potential. I mean, do you find yourself having to deal with these international organizations quite a lot? Obviously, because, you know, they can often be forgotten. You know, when it comes to making regulations, people kind of look to governments.
Yes.
But in actual fact, these international organizations, many of which are sort of pretty overtly US aligned, they have a big say in it as well. Do you talk with a lot of people from those organizations?
Well, in our course of work, we speak to many different policymakers globally. We speak to regulatory agencies globally to really help them understand the beauty of crypto, right? One of the biggest misconceptions about crypto is used for money laundering, for example. People keep saying, oh yeah, it's a scam, it's money laundering that takes place. But I present data and facts every time I see them. I say, you really think that's the case? Okay, so based on the US Financial Crime Office data, in any given year, in the fiat space, there's close to $800 billion to $2 trillion in terms of money laundered via the fiat system, right? Singapore recently has a very big case where, you know, a group of people has been rounded up for laundering 1.8 billion.
Wow.
Look up that case, it's a very interesting case. So you see all these things happening in fiat, but doesn't get reported until these people are nabbed. On the other hand, crypto has a daily, weekly news about money laundering issues. Right? But if you look at the data from Chainalysis, last year, I mean, they published this on a yearly basis, and crypto is a traceable technology, right? So if you have 100 million, I can assure you that if you want to distribute the 100 million by crypto, you can trace it quite easily. You have 100 million in fiat currency today, in cash, you start spending it, I can assure you, you wouldn't know where it flows to, right? So I always stress that, say, look at the data. Chainalysis stated last year the amount of money laundering or illicit activities that's happening in this space is about $10 billion. So you do a simple math, it's 0.02%, right, of what's happening in the fiat space. So if you focus on what's the important, where 99.98% is happening, you have reported a lot more on that front instead of what's happening. It's because of this lack of understanding. So we actually conduct courses for regulators, for law enforcement agencies throughout the world. Last year, we conducted 70 programs throughout the world to show them the power of crypto, to show them the power of technology. How do you trace all these illicit funds that's flowing, concerns about risk, money laundering, how do you address them? And this is a much more powerful tool than what you see in the traditional fiat space. I have to say that most of the people that have attended the program are thoroughly impressed. They get a much deeper understanding of this space. And that's something that the industry will need to continue to do, to bring them over, to help them understand what this technology brings to the table.
I wanted to ask that because I was in a discussion recently on Twitter, Twitter Spaces about regulation, and we had a few people on who sort of see it from the other side, and one of them said, you know, it's important to remember that regulators are people too, and you know, the temptation is often to look at regulatory bodies and kind of see them as this sort of big blob that's kind of sentient, you know, and making decisions all of its own. But in actual fact, you know, it's made up of people who have different opinions. I mean, the SEC is a good example. Like people like Hester Pierce are actually very pro-crypto. Have you found that talking to regulators and international organizations, are there actually quite a few people on the inside of these organizations who understand crypto already and who kind of appreciate it, or do you feel that you're very much coming up against a sort of entrenched view?
I would say that compared to 4 years ago, it's a much better situation now, right? And it manifests in the fact that many more are thinking about, I mean, today, if you look at the global landscape, only 1/3 of global regulators are regulating crypto in some manner. Right? 2/3 are still not regulating. But if you look at 4 years ago, that is very few. Only I would say less than 3% are regulating crypto at that point in time. So you have seen a shift. So the direction of travel is very clear. You're going to get more regulations. Regulators are going to devote more time in terms of understanding this sector with the view of how best to regulate them. So indeed, there are many more people within the regulatory agencies starting to look into this space. And many of them does not have any preconceived notion, Some do,
Yeah.
and that you need to take a longer time to try to convince and educate them about what are true and what are false. There's a lot of misreporting within the crypto industry. And you have to convince them with facts, with data, with instances of examples. Right? And that's what we do on a day-to-day basis as well in the course of our work.
Yeah. Richard, I've taken up a lot of your time already today, but if you don't mind, if I've just got a couple more questions I want to ask you. Firstly, how is, just going back to Binance, how is Binance preparing for the next bull market? Now, obviously, the halving is coming next year. Many people think that market conditions may start to improve from next year onwards. Perhaps we're going to have to wait till 2025. Of course, no one knows. But what is Binance doing? What are you guys working on in order to prepare for that? And do you think you're sort of ready now to welcome potentially huge numbers of new users?
Well, I always say that in order to be successful and sustainable, we need to make sure that we engage and cultivate three key group of stakeholders well, right? The first group are obviously our users. Mm-hmm. We have continued to grow despite the sentiment of the market. We have reached 150 million users by now. So user base are extremely important to us, right? Maintaining that user confidence, understanding their needs in terms of products and services, and continue to roll out new services that they need. Are extremely important. So we continue to engage our users and community very closely to understand what's the trend of the future, what's their needs for the future, to make sure that we meet their needs. The second key group of stakeholders that we need to engage and cultivate and do well are really the regulators and the policymakers, which we have spoken at great length, right? Helping them to understand better the sector, coming up with frameworks that's proportionate, managing the risks, as well as supporting the innovation and growth. And the third key group of stakeholders are all the external partners that we have. Right? This could be banking partners, payment partners, media partners like yourself. So we have many different external partners that we are engaging at any point in time. We need to make sure that we have strong relations with all of them. Again, some of these partners will have misunderstanding, misconception from time to time that we need to address. And these are gaps that we need to close. So as long as we continue to make sure that these three key group of stakeholders are managed well, we will be successful in the longer term. So we continue to add to that. At the same time, internally, we are looking at our core infrastructure, right? Our hard tech, in terms of technology and operations that are robust for the next spike in terms of volume. We have the right talent to bring the franchise going forward in terms of management as well as bench strength. So those are the things that we continue to focus a lot of attention on.
Great. And one last question, Richard. Do you think that the last few months, as I said, have been difficult for the industry, they've been difficult for Binance in general? Do you think this year is going to be one that we look back on as an industry and go, it was hard, but genuine progress was made? Or do you think it's going to be a year to forget?
I would say it's the former, right? I would say it's hard, but there are many positives, as I mentioned, right? So I'm very happy with the positive I'm seeing. Firstly, you have more regulators coming out and flying that flag, including in Asia Pacific, you have Hong Kong saying that we wish to be a crypto hub. And all these are key positives for the industry. In Europe, you have MiCA that was introduced. And that provides certainty for the entire industry, for all the European companies going forward, to have a single passport by the end of next year, where you can serve the entire European community. Again, those regulatory certainty are extremely important and extremely useful for the industry. From 5 years ago, where regulators think that crypto will go away, to now, regulators are formulating framework, means it's here to stay, right? So those are very key positive. And the second key positive is on a daily basis, despite whatever negative reporting that you see on the crypto front, but on a daily basis now, you have seen all the financial institutions announcing their blockchain or crypto agenda, trying to file for ETFs to offer to investors. Again, those are very, very positive trends, right? And with that, you're going to bring in much greater liquidity into this industry into the future. You're going to bring a lot more talent pool, a lot more research going in. And those are extremely positive things for the future.
Fantastic, fantastic. Richard, this has been great. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy schedule to talk to us today. Enjoy the rest of the week. Enjoy the